In the heart of East Africa, surrounded by green hills and thick forests, lay the village of Ntenga. It was a place where time moved slowly, and tradition was the thread that held everything together. The people of Ntenga believed in the wisdom of the ancestors, the power of the drum, and the stories told around fires under starry skies. Every home was made of red clay and topped with thatched roofs. Goats roamed freely, children played with wooden toys, and elders sat under the baobab trees, sharing old folk tales with anyone who listened. The villagers lived simple lives, but they were proud. Each family respected the chief, the land, and the spirits of the forest. No one questioned the rules, because they were written long ago and passed down through generations. Among these traditions was one rule that stood out from all others. When a daughter of a chief or elder turned 12, she must attend Safawa Girls' Academy. Safawa was not like any other school. It was built deep inside the forest, far from the village paths, where the trees whispered secrets and the wind carried the voices of those long gone. No roads led to it. Girls were taken there by the village's old women, wrapped in colorful cloth, their feet bare, carrying nothing but a small gourd of water and a woven bag of dried maize. The school itself was built of stone, covered in vines and sacred markings. Some said it was built by the ancestors themselves. Safawa had no gates, but the girls who entered never returned until the time was right. No one ever said what that right time was. The rule was clear. You leave when the school chooses you to leave. Only daughters of chiefs and elders were allowed to enter. The rest of the village girls stayed behind, learning to cook, weave, and tend to the animals. But those chosen for Safawa were told they would one day become leaders, wives of chiefs, or wise women of the land. And so, every season, when the forest drums echoed across Ntenga, another group of girls would vanish into the trees, hearts pounding, eyes wide. They were the chosen ones, and Safawa was waiting. Zawadi had always been different from the other girls in Ntenga. At 14, she stood taller than most, with strong legs from climbing trees and quick hands from catching fish by the river. Her skin glowed like the earth after rain, and her eyes sparkled with the kind of curiosity that often got her into trouble. She asked too many questions. She liked to know why the sun rose from the east, why the baobab tree never lost all its leaves, and what was really behind the mountains that surrounded Ntenga. Her father, Chief Bako, was proud of her, though he didn't always say it aloud. He was a man of few words and strong rules, but whenever Zawadi spoke, he listened. "You were born on a stormy night," he once told her, "and the wind hasn't left you since." Zawadi's mother had passed away when she was just a baby, and she was raised mostly by her grandmother, Mawa. Mawa was old, her back curved like the crescent moon, and her voice was as soft as banana leaves rustling in the wind. But her eyes missed nothing. She had lived through wars, floods, and famine, and she held on to traditions like they were gold. When the day came for Zawadi to leave for Safawa Girls' Academy, the entire village gathered. Drums were played, songs were sung, and the elders danced in a circle around her. Zawadi wore a necklace made of cowrie shells and a head wrap embroidered with the symbols of her family line. She felt proud. She felt chosen. Her heart beat fast with excitement. She couldn't wait to see the school hidden in the forest, the place where girls became women of wisdom. As she turned to leave, her grandmother grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "Zawadi," Mawa said, "you must listen carefully now. Once you enter Safawa, you don't leave until the school chooses. It is not like the other places. It lives. It watches. It decides." Zawadi blinked. "But what if I want to come home?" "You won't," Mawa replied, her eyes cloudy but serious. "No one ever wants to, not until it is too late." Her father said nothing. He only placed his hand on her shoulder, firm and warm. Then, with the old women leading the way, Zawadi walked barefoot into the forest path, her thoughts racing like the river during the rainy season. Leaves brushed her shoulders. Shadows danced between the trees. She held her breath as the village sounds faded behind her. Somewhere deep in the forest, a drumbeat echoed once. Then again. Safawa was waiting. The forest grew thicker as Zawadi followed the silent women deeper into its heart. Sunlight filtered through the tall trees in golden strips, lighting the path just enough to see where her feet landed. After what felt like hours, the trees opened into a wide clearing, and there stood Safawa Girls' Academy. It was nothing like the village huts. The building was made of heavy, black stones stacked tightly together, covered in moss and flowering vines. It looked ancient, as if it had grown out of the ground itself. Strange carvings lined the walls. Faces with large eyes, spirals, birds, and animal spirits. They seemed to watch Zawadi as she stepped closer. At the front gate, there was no lock, no guard, and no fence. Yet something about it felt like a boundary, an invisible line that could not be crossed once entered. Inside, the courtyard was quiet. There were no loud greetings, no cheerful noise. Only a few girls walked through the stone paths, all wearing simple cloth wraps in earthy tones. Their heads turned as Zawadi walked in, curious but not surprised. She was led to a long hall where 3 girls sat weaving mats. "This is Aminata," the oldest woman said, pointing to a tall, dark-skinned girl with short hair and serious eyes. "Kemi," she nodded to a girl with a round face and dimples, who gave Zawadi a shy smile. "And Ngozi," she finished, showing a girl with long braids and bracelets on both wrists. Ngozi waved slightly, her eyes sharp like a hawk. "You are sisters now," the old woman said. "Learn together, eat together, dream together." With that, the woman walked away, leaving Zawadi standing in the quiet stone hall. Later, the girls showed her around. The dorm rooms were bare, just grass mats, wooden stools, and bowls. The classroom had no blackboard, only carved stones with ancient symbols. The library smelled of old paper and smoke. No one ever spoke too loudly, and there were no guards, no gates, no chains. Still no one left. "Why doesn't anyone run away?" Zawadi asked that night. Aminata looked at her and whispered, "Because no one ever returns." Zawadi felt a chill in her bones. As the drums began to beat in the far distance, she looked toward the open forest. There were no fences, yet the school held them all like a closed fist. On her second day at Safawa, Zawadi noticed something strange. No bells rang, no teachers shouted, but the girls moved like clockwork. At sunrise, they gathered in the stone circle for lessons. At midday, they ate from wooden bowls in silence, and when the sun dipped low, everyone returned to their rooms without being told. Zawadi wanted to understand the rules, but no one ever read them aloud. They were whispered, passed down by the older girls like secrets too heavy to carry. One evening, as they sat weaving beside the fire, Aminata finally spoke. "There are 3 rules you must never break," she said quietly, her eyes darting around as if the shadows could hear. 1. Never look outside after sunset. Zawadi frowned. "Why not?" Kemi leaned in. "Because something looks back." Zawadi shivered, but listened. 2. Never ask what happened to the girls before us. Zawadi's curiosity rose. "What if I want to know? Then you'll disappear like them," Ngozi said flatly, tossing another log onto the fire. Zawadi felt her stomach twist. "And the 3rd, she whispered. Aminata's voice dropped lower. "Never, ever touch the red door." That night, Zawadi noticed the red door for the first time. It stood at the far end of the dining hall, made of thick wood and painted deep crimson. It had no handle, no lock, but something about it made her heart beat faster. Girls always avoided walking too close to it. Even Madame Nyoka, the head matron, kept her distance. That night, Zawadi couldn't sleep. Outside, The forest seemed alive. The wind howled like a grieving mother, and deep within the trees, a drumbeat echoed, soft, steady, and haunting. It came every night, just after sunset. No one ever spoke of it, but everyone heard it. 1 week later, a girl named Binta broke the first rule. She had arrived a season before Zawadi, and was known for being fearless. That night, she stood near the open window and stared into the forest after the sun had set. Her voice trembled when she called to something only she could see. "Who's out there?" she whispered. The next morning, her bed was empty. Her mat, her bowl, even her sandals were gone, as if she had never been there at all. When Zawadi asked Madame Nyoka where Binta went, the woman's lips tightened. "No questions about the past," she said sharply. "Focus on your lessons." From then on, fear settled into the stone walls of Safawa like dust. Zawadi felt it pressing on her chest at night, listening to the drums and wondering what secrets the red door hid. Whatever was happening at Safawa, it was no ordinary school. Ever since Binta vanished, Zawadi couldn't stop thinking about the red door. It stood tall at the end of the dining hall, untouched, unmoved. The crimson paint was faded in some places, as if many hands had once reached for it. There were no hinges, no handle, just smooth wood that seemed to breathe with the stone walls around it. Zawadi sat across from it during every meal, barely chewing her food as she stared. The other girls noticed. Kemi nudged her one afternoon, whispering, "Don't let your eyes stay too long. The door sees who stares." But Zawadi couldn't look away. Something about that door called to her. It wasn't fear that pulled her. It was curiosity, sharp and bright like fire. One night, as they lay on their mats, Zawadi whispered, "What's behind it?" Aminata rolled over. "They say it leads to Njozi," she said. "The world of forgotten dreams." Zawadi's brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" Ngozi, half asleep, muttered, "A place where broken girls go, where no one remembers your name." "They don't come back," Kemi added softly. "If the door opens for you, it means you're lost." The red door had become a ghost in Zawadi's mind. During class, during chores, even in her dreams, she saw it, sometimes open, sometimes glowing, sometimes breathing like a living thing. She tried asking Madame Nyoka once, "What is the red door for?" Zawadi asked, standing straight, hiding the tremble in her voice. Madame Nyoka turned her head slowly, her eyes like cold coals. "Obedience is what keeps you safe," she said. "The door is not your concern." After that, Nyoka watched her more closely. Wherever Zawadi went, the matron's eyes followed. She stood near the dining hall longer. She checked the doors at night. She walked the halls when others slept. Still, Zawadi could not let it go. Something deep inside her whispered that the answers were behind that red door. Not just about the school, but about herself. She began to notice strange things. Shadows moving without people, old carvings on the walls glowing faintly during thunderstorms, and whispers that came from cracks in the stone. She began to believe the stories, and she knew someday soon she would have to open the red door, no matter what waited behind it. The library at Safawa was quiet, always quiet. Dust floated in the shafts of light that came through small, cracked windows. Rows of wooden shelves stood heavy with books, some in languages no one could read anymore. Zawadi visited often. It was the only place where her questions didn't feel like trouble. One afternoon, while searching for a book on village histories, her fingers brushed something hidden behind the shelf. It wasn't a book. It was a leather-bound diary, worn with age and tied shut with a frayed string. She looked around. No one was watching, then slipped it into her satchel and hurried out. Back in the dorm, with her blanket pulled over her head and the candle barely flickering, she untied the string and opened the first page. The name inside was written in neat, sharp letters. Akying, daughter of Chief Oburu. The date was many seasons ago, long before Zawadi had ever walked the earth. Zawadi read quickly, her eyes wide with wonder and fear. Aking wrote about the same red door, the same drumbeats, the same rules, but she had dared to ask questions. She had dared to follow the sounds in the night. She described something called the test, a trial given to certain girls, chosen by the spirits of the school. They come at night, in dreams, Aking wrote. They test your truth, your courage, your heart. Only those who pass may leave. Zawadi's hands trembled as she turned the pages. The entries grew shorter. Aking sounded more afraid with each word. They say I'm close now. The red door whispered my name last night. I think it's almost time. And then nothing. The last page was blank. No final words. No ending. As if the diary had simply stopped breathing. Zawadi closed the book, her thoughts racing. The school didn't just keep them in. It watched. It waited. And one by one, it tested them. She hid the diary under her mat, her heart pounding like the forest drums. Was she next? Had the door already chosen her? As the wind howled outside and the candle flickered low, she swore she heard her name whispered from the far end of the hall. Not by a person, but by something ancient. Something behind the red door. The red door remained closed, but something inside the school had changed. Zawadi noticed it first in the others. Kemi woke up one morning with her eyes wide and wet, whispering about a river of fire. Ngozi sat silently by the fire pit, staring at her hands like they didn't belong to her. Aminata walked slower now, often lost in thought, like she had seen something she couldn't explain. They're coming, Ngozi whispered one night. The test has started. Zawadi didn't ask how she knew. She just felt it in her bones. That night, as the moon hung full and heavy in the sky, Zawadi fell into a deep sleep. But it was no ordinary dream. She opened her eyes to find herself standing in a vast, open plain under a blood-orange sky. The air shimmered with heat, but her skin felt cool. Before her stood a great lion, tall, golden, and silent. His eyes glowed like burning coals. First, the test of courage. The lion spoke, his voice deep and steady. He roared, and flames erupted in a ring around her. The ground trembled. From the center of the fire rose a dark figure. Zawadi's own reflection, but twisted and angry. You're nothing, it hissed. You ask questions, but you fear the truth. Zawadi clenched her fists. I fear nothing except silence. She stepped through the flames. They licked her skin, but didn't burn. Her shadow screamed and vanished. The fire died out. The lion bowed and vanished into the dust. In the blink of an eye, she stood in a dark forest under a silver moon. Perched above her was a wise old owl with feathers like the stars. Now, the test of wisdom, the owl hooted. Before her appeared two paths. One led to a golden crown, the other to a small, crying child. Choose, said the owl. Zawadi turned toward the crown. It shimmered with promise, but the child's sobs pierced her heart. She walked to the child, lifted it gently, and whispered, No crown is worth more than a soul. The forest faded. The owl bowed and flew away. Then came the river. A crocodile emerged, its back covered in ancient symbols. Its eyes held secrets. The test of honesty, it growled. Speak the one truth you fear to say. Zawadi swallowed hard. I'm not sure I'm ready to lead, but I want to be. The crocodile's eyes narrowed. Then it smiled. The water rose, covering her completely. She awoke in her bed at Safwa, gasping, heart racing. But something was different. The red door was glowing. The next night, Zawadi did not sleep. Her eyes stayed fixed on the red door. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat within the stone. The other girls were quiet, their breathing soft in the dark room. But Zawadi knew her journey wasn't over. When the moon reached its highest point, the drums began again, but this time, they beat not from the forest, but from inside her own chest. The room dissolved. She was standing once more in the glowing space between worlds. The air shimmered. Before her stood all three spirit animals, the lion, the owl, and the crocodile. They circled her slowly. "You have faced courage," the lion rumbled. "You have spoken wisdom," the owl added. "You have offered honesty," hissed the crocodile. "But one test remains," they said in unison. "The one no girl has ever passed." Before her appeared a small figure, Aching, the girl from the diary. She stood with her head bowed, wrapped in shadows, her hands trembling. "She failed," the spirit said. "She was afraid to forgive. Now, show us what you will do." Zawadi stepped forward. Aching's eyes were filled with sorrow. "I don't know how," she whispered. "I tried, but the school trapped me." Zawadi didn't respond with anger. She didn't ask questions. Instead, she reached out and took Aching's hands. "You're not forgotten," she said. "You're not alone." The shadows around Aching began to lift. Her body shimmered like mist touched by sunlight. She smiled, tears rolling down her cheeks. The spirits paused. The lion nodded. The owl blinked once. The crocodile bowed its head. "You have passed the final test," they said. "Not with might, not with pride, but with heart." Suddenly, Zawadi was back in the dining hall. The red door creaked. Without wind, without touch, it slowly opened, revealing golden light and a soft breeze that smelled of rain and earth. The girls gathered in silence, eyes wide. Even Aminata gasped. Madame Nyoka appeared from the shadows. Her lips pressed together. Her eyes searched Zawadi's. Then, to everyone's astonishment, Madame Nyoka bowed deeply. "You are no longer a student," she said. "You are a pathmaker." Zawadi stepped through the door. Behind her, the girls followed, one by one. The curse was broken. The cycle had ended. For the first time in generations, the red door stayed open, and Zawadi walked out, not just free, but ready to lead. The path out of the forest was bathed in golden morning light. Zawadi walked at the front, her head high, her feet steady. Behind her followed the girls of Safawa, Aminata, Kemi, Ngozi, and dozens more. Their footsteps were quiet, but their eyes were alive, filled with freedom and hope. Birds sang above them, and the trees that once loomed now swayed gently, as if bowing farewell. When the first villager of Ntenga saw them emerge from the forest, she dropped her water pot in shock. A cry rang out, loud and high. People rushed from their homes, eyes wide with disbelief. The girls have returned." Chief Bako stood frozen as Zawadi approached. His hands trembled slightly, but his face remained still. Mawa, her grandmother, broke into tears and ran forward, wrapping Zawadi in a tight embrace. "I told them you were different," she whispered. "The wind has brought you back." The village gathered around. Elders, mothers, children, all staring, waiting. Zawadi stepped onto the central stone platform, where only leaders were allowed to speak. She looked around at the faces that once sent her into the unknown. "No girl was ever meant to stay lost," she began. Her voice was calm, but it carried power. Safawa was not just a school. It was a test of courage, of truth, of heart. She paused, letting her words sink in. "We were told to obey, to follow, but we learned to listen to ourselves. We faced fear, not with weapons, but with understanding. We broke the cycle, not with force, but with kindness." Whispers spread through the crowd. Mothers held their daughters close. Elders exchanged glances. Chief Bako finally nodded, his eyes misty. "You have returned not just as a girl," he said, stepping forward, "but as a leader." Drums began to beat. This time in celebration, the girls of Sapphoa danced, not out of duty, but out of joy. The village that once watched them vanish now embraced them like the rising sun. Zawadi knew the journey was far from over. But in that moment, as she looked out at Ntenga, she realized something powerful. She hadn't just come back. She had come back to change everything. After Zawadi's return, nothing in Ntenga remained the same. The red door of Sapphoa, once feared and forbidden, stood open for all to see. The girls who had followed Zawadi out of the forest returned to their families, laughing, weeping, dancing. The village held the longest celebration in its history, with music that echoed for days and drums that didn't sleep. But Zawadi knew the work had only begun. With Chief Bako's blessing and the support of the village elders, she returned to Sapphoa not as a student, but as its new guardian. Madame Nyoka, quiet and proud, handed her a carved staff once held by the school's first founder. "Lead with your heart," she said, "not with chains." Under Zawadi's leadership, Sapphoa was transformed. The forest path was cleared so that anyone could come and go. Girls from every background, not just daughters of chiefs, were welcomed through its stone gates. New classrooms were built with murals of the lion, the owl, and the crocodile, symbols of courage, wisdom, and honesty. Lessons were no longer whispered. They were sung aloud. Questions were encouraged. Dreams were shared. No red doors remained. Zawadi's journey became a tale told by every fire in Ntenga. Children listened wide-eyed as their grandmothers spoke of the girl who walked through fear and led others to freedom. "She opened more than a door," they would say. "She opened a way." As the seasons passed, Zawadi was chosen to sit among the village council. Some doubted at first, but her calm voice and bold ideas slowly won even the oldest hearts. When Chief Bako grew too ill to lead, the people gathered and voted. For the first time in Ntenga's long history, a woman was named chief. Chief Zawadi stood under the baobab tree, dressed in traditional robes, a crown of beads resting gently on her head. The village erupted in cheers. Her grandmother, now very old, held her hand and whispered, "The wind chose well." Under her rule, Ntenga became known as the Village of Light, where girls were free, where learning was sacred, and where tradition walked hand in hand with change. And still, by the evening fire, the story of Zawadi and the Red Door was told, not as a warning, but as a promise that no door can stay closed forever. Not when kindness is stronger than fear. Not when one brave girl dares to ask, "Why not me?"